Okay, we'll begin now. So, this sikha, again, combines very interesting ideas when we're talking about the topic in our parsha about Soim Tasim Alach HaMelech, that there's a mitzvah called Mitzvahs Minui Melech. By the way, a lot of the ideas later on in the sikha is taken from a maimer at Tzemach Tzedek in the Sefer called Sefer HaMitzvah Tzemach Tzedek, also known as Derech Mitzvah, called Mitzvahs Minui Melech. As kids in yeshiva, 14 years old, we learned this in yeshiva. And the Rebbe takes ideas from there as well. But also what he does is he takes those ideas and he brings it down in a more simple sense, and then he brings it the deeper concept as well. But the Rebbe contrasts a very well-known question. Old Mefarshim asked this question. He contrasts the mitzvah of Minui Melech that we have in our parsha, which is in yesterday's Chitas, with the idea that we see historically when Shmuel Hanavi was asked by Am Yisrael to have a melech, he said, what do you want? You don't want me. And Hashem said they don't want me either. And, how can you say that? It's a mitzvah. What's going on? So this is what we're going to talk about. And then, of course, the Rebbe is going to bring out a very practical hayrah, even though these days there's no idea of melech, but still there's a practical hayrah for us as well. The mitzvahs Minui Melech, Soim Tasim Alach HaMelech, Yidua Shailam, Kasher Bnei Yisrael Bikshu Mishmuel Hanavi. T'nan lanu melech, lo yihayas vayratzim mezeh klal. And not only that, but then when he turned to the Eibishter and said, they don't care about me, because up till then, the Nevi'im, they were the leaders. So Shmuel Hanavi was the leader. So he said, they don't care about me, they don't like me. So Hashem said, you think it's just you that they don't like? That really, they don't like me either. And that's why they wanted to have a king. In this week's parsha, he told the Yidden, Soim Tasim Alach HaMelech. Ubefrat al pi maimer Chazal, Gimel mitzvahs nitztav Yisrael b'knisas l'Aretz, lahamed lamelech, and to build a Beis HaMikdash, and to destroy the Zari Shal HaMolek. So shemazem muvan shezoi mitzvah nailus b'yoser, because if these three mitzvahs are the things that they were commanded only when they went to Eretz Yisrael, va'af min ha-mitzvahs hatluyos ba'aretz, it's understood how choshev this mitzvah is. You can't just do it anywhere. You can't just decide anywhere to have a melech. You need to have, this is something connected with the holiness and the specialness of Eretz Yisrael, that when you go into Eretz Yisrael, that's when they're commanded to have a melech.
Shmuel saw this coming. He had to see it coming.
He had to see it coming also. So the question is, what was his problem with it? And he, of course, knew what it said in Chumash, what we learned in yesterday's Shir Chumash. Soim Tasim Alach HaMelech. What's he getting so, it's a kratz, as they say. Perhaps you're going to say, there was something specifically wrong with the way they asked for a king. And we'll explain that. So if so, why did he agree? If it was okay, why did he complain? And if there was something wrong with the way they did it or whatever, so then Hashem should have told them, don't listen to them, don't accept what they're saying. And this is what he says from the Tzemach Tzedek, Mitzvahs Minui Melech, what is the purpose of appointing a king? What's the reason to have a king? If you have anyway a leader that does everything that a king does, what does it help to specifically have someone that's called a king? In those days, there were shoftim and there were nevi'im, and the shoftim did everything that the king did anyway. They had to go to war, the shofet took them out to war. Why do you need specifically that the Torah says, Soim Tasim Alach HaMelech? There must be something that a melech gives to the Am that a shofet can't give, that a navi can't give. So he says, it's two in Yon. Zel Amaylam Mizeh that a melech does. Aleph, Tam Pashut. Kibel Shoyna Mishnah, Il Moloi Mayrosh, O Malchus Ish, Es Reu Chaim Bloy. It says in Pirkei Avos, that you need to daven for the welfare of the government. Why? Because the government physically protects people. That people would chas v'sholem literally swallow up each other alive. It's an amazing expression. The Rebbe speaks about it on Pirkei Avos.
Same thing the Navi
So
did.
no, because after all, he didn't have the type of control like a king has. A Navi doesn't command armies.
Right, so he didn't do it.
So
You need a king.
exactly, that's why you need to have a king, because a king has something that a Navi doesn't have. A king has armies, a king has police, a king has control, and therefore a government is going to make sure that they don't literally swallow each other alive. Like I said, the Rebbe has sichos about it to explain what that unusual expression is. It's like such a unbelievable expression. Shamelech Yanig Hamedina v'Yifol Shahanhagas Anshe Hamedina Tia Karoi. They should act like people. They should act not like animals in the zoo. V'Hainu Shafilu Kasher Aseichel Mevin Sheyesh Lisnai Kideboy. This is an obvious thing. Any person you're going to ask, they're going to tell you you shouldn't be swallowing up another person. You shouldn't be attacking another person. So, but still in all, even when my seichel says this is something right, even if you had a country with people that all understand what right is, and I would say the vast majority of people in the world know what's right and know that murder is wrong. Could you leave a country without a government, without a police force? No. You need to have someone to enforce it. And once the heart gets into the situation, so even though intellectually I might know it's right, but there's road rage, the guy cut me off, I'm going to smash up his car. That is the lowest level, the base level of why there's a benefit of having a king. Base. Then there's a higher level. The matzav sheboy hamoich shalta alev b'tmidi is in a situation where a person's mind does control his heart. What is his benefit of a king? Since he doesn't have the problem that he's going to go swallow up his friend. Ein min melech nachotz l'inyan ha'amur aval yesh lam inyan mesuyamim sha'am ein loy das lahavin keitzad yesh lisnaig bahem v'rak ha'melech mitzad ma'alosei shemishich umaylo gavoya mikol. There's a description in the Navi when Shmuel Hanavi went looking for a king, he found Shaul HaMelech, and he's described as our favorite shampoo, head and shoulders above the rest. That's where it comes from. What does it mean? Literally, where everybody else's head was where Shaul HaMelech's shoulders were. But it means also beruchnis, Chassidus explains, that the shoulders is the beginning of the arms. According to Chassidus, the arms have to do, like we say in Paschal Yom on Friday afternoon, we say, Chesed Droy Yemina, the right arm is the level of kindness, the midas HaChesed, Gvura Droy Smaller, the left arm is the mid of Gvura. So, what's by us a level of intellect, by him that was only his midas, which means his intellect was way higher than everybody else's intellect. So things that we couldn't understand that it's right and correct, he would understand. That's the higher reason why we need to have a melech. Not to enforce things that I know is right, but there are things I don't know is right, and I need the king to tell me that it's right. Again, with the impression, he needs to be mitzaveh. He's meiven oisam v'u mitzaveh u'mefaked ala'am ma'aleim lasois. V'anshe ha'medina oisim came beglal tzivi ha'melech. Whereas the Navi doesn't have that strength and power of enforcing to say, this is what's right, and you got to do it because I said so. Like our parents used to ask our parents, why? So the parents said, because I said so. Why did the parents answer that? And why do we answer that to our kids now? Because there are certain things you can't go ahead and explain to them. It's time to go to bed. Why? Because I said it's time to go to bed. You're going to start explaining to them because or else the next morning you're not going to... That's it. בפנימיוס ובשורשי של עם ישראל, שאדוינם ומלכם הוא הקדוש ברוך הוא. והמלך בשר ודם המסמנה הוא הממוצע שמגלה מלכוסי יסברך לישראל. This is something that Chassidus now takes it a step deeper and says like this. The king is really supposed to be a total representative of Hashem. It's not about his ego, it's not about his power, but his might, his strength, his pekuda is supposed to be because he's so bottled to Hashem that he is supposed to represent Hashem's will down here. And by us following the king's directives, by us following what the king tells us to do, it's just a means to bring home to us what Hashem wants us to do. I'll just give a mashal from something a little bit different, but a little bit similar to this. It says, they tell a story about a chassid after the Tsar was overthrown in Russia, and then there were elections and there was different things. Eventually the communists took over, but it wasn't right away. So when the Tsar was overthrown, this chassid was crying. Why was he crying? Because he said, how am I going to be able to appreciate what it speaks about in Chassidus? People are not going to be able to appreciate. Chassidus talks a lot about Hashem being a king. If we don't have a physical example of a king, we can't appreciate what it means, Hashem's kingship. But over there, the king was, an evil person, a dictator. He was a Soni Yisrael, etc., etc. But the point is, a king amongst Yidden is supposed to be an actual representative of Hashem's will, and by acting in a kingly fashion, and by enforcing the laws, he is really communicating and bringing down Hashem's kingship here in this world. Bnei Yisrael mitzad atzmam ma'aminim, mevinim u'margishim shechayusam nimsheches u'ba memalchus shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, normally if their mind would be in concert with their heart, if they would make sure that their heart followed their mind, the inyan zeh tzarich la'ir b'mesabitl HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like we said before, they have this natural emunah, but it doesn't filter down to their heart. It doesn't filter down to their actions. So by the king making himself boss over them, it's not really about himself, it's just communicating and bringing out Hashem's will down here. That is one stage of Yidden. Then there's a higher stage of Yidden. Yidden that do appreciate and do follow through and do feel a bittul to Hashem. Aval kasher matzavim shebnei Yisrael k'deboyim v'yesh ne'etzlam bittul zel alakus mitzad atzmam azai ha'pu'ula v'achidush shal minui ha'melech hem ba'oifen naila yoyser ha'madregis b'alakus shebnei Yisrael mitzad atzmam einam yicholim lahagia aleim liyoysam l'mayla masagosam. There is, in the Chassidus speaks about that a Yid can comprehend many things about Hashem from the world around him. In some ways, the way Hashem gives life to the world, it's like the neshama giving life to the body, the Chazal say. But then there are aspects of Hashem that are beyond our comprehension. So the bittul that a Yid can have to Hashem because of what he understands is as much as he understands about Hashem. But then there are aspects of Hashem that are completely beyond his understanding. Like you remember we said before, that there are rules that the king understands that the simple person doesn't understand. The same thing, there's ideas about Hashem that we don't appreciate, and we need the king to just embody the will of Hashem and to bring about our bittul, even to those ideas and those levels that we don't understand. Because he's so high, like we said, ממשיך ומשפיע אויסם לעם ישראל, ועניין זה פועל בהם שתהיה אצלם גם דרגה ניילס יויסר בירו ביטל, ביטל של המיילם הבנוסם והשגוסם. They don't just have a bittul because of what they understand, but they also have a bittul because of what they see the king has a bittul. And what the king brings about with his service of Hashem, that he impacts the Yidden to bring them to a higher level. So now we'll be able to go back to the story with Shmuel and understand what was bothering Shmuel. Gimel. Al Pizi Yiturtzu Shailas Hanal. Shmuel Hanavi Rotza Shematzavam Shel Bnei Yisrael Yeh Ba'ifin Kazeh Sheyamdu Bebitul Alakus Mitzad Atzmon Leloy Tzayrech B'Melech. The initial bittul, the lower level of bittul, just following through that moyach should be shal ta'alev, and because I believe in Hashem, I do what Hashem wants. But the only thing that you'll need a king for is the higher level of bittul. V'amelech yifel etzlam es hadarga hayoyser nail shel bittul v'yira bechlal yira yilah. This is called a higher level of yira. The Rebbe in a Maimer speaks about that shofar brings out by a person yira, an awe of Hashem. Hayitaka shofar be'ir va'am lo yechradu. But there's a difference between the shofar that we blow in Elul and the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. The shofar on Rosh Hashanah brings about a yira ilah, a very great yira of Hashem. The shofar in Elul brings about a Yirat Atah, but it must be the Yirat Atah before you come to the Yirat Law. So Shmuel was saying, you should have on your own the basic type of level of Yiras Shamayim, your acceptance of Hashem, and following through without needing a policeman to tell you what to do, without needing a king to tell you what to do. What I wanted you to have a king for is to have that higher level of Yira that you wouldn't have had on your own. That Shmuel would never have refused. That Shmuel would not have had a problem with. Avol b'nei Yisrael bikshu melech l'shoftenu kechol hagoyim. It says over there in the pasuk. Melech sheyifal etzlam eshlilus ha'inyan de'ishus reu chayim bloi. They want to have a king just like by the non-Jewish nations they have kings. Over there, by the non-Jewish nations, they don't have a king to be able to bring them to a Yirei Law, to a high level of awe of Hashem. Over there, they have a king just so they don't kill each other. So Shmuel was like disappointed. He said, that's what you're asking a king for? So you shouldn't be Kechol HaGoyim. V'davar zeh moire shehoitze chaseda etzlam hadarge de Yir Shamayim shetzricha liis etzel b'nei Yisrael mitzad atzmam. You're going to ask the question in footnote 10. V'lachein amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu ki oisim ha'asuchulu gaimer chasra lahem Yir Shamayim. So the Rebbe asked the question that I think Rabbi Pinney wanted to ask in the footnote. He says, what do you mean that that was what Shmuel's problem was? Even in our parsha where it says, Soim tasim alecha melech, it says, Asima alai melech kichol hagoyim asher sivaisai. So we see already by the mitzvah of Minui Melech in our parsha, it does the same thing. It compares it that the Yidden would want a king like the goyim around them. So why was Shmuel surprised and disappointed and upset if that was like built into the system, that that's why you can have a king?
No, but maybe that's the reason, but still he's disappointed because he thought that after everything they get to the higher reason.
But it seems to be this is part of the command of the Eibush. It's part of the mitzvah. So the Rebbe says, the Ramban gives a very interesting taich in this. That over here the Torah was hinting at what's going to happen in the future. L'ramois mizoisav ala sidus. The Torah was trying to tell us that, you know what? The Yidden are not going to ask it for the real good reason to have a king. They're going to ask it for the wrong reason. They're going to say, Osim alai melech kechol hagoyim. But not that the Torah wanted it to be that way. Not that that's part of the real reason for the mitzvah of Soim tasim alecha melech. The Rabban is saying that this was something that the Torah was saying they're going to mess up with this mitzvah. So therefore, we'll move on.
More of the setup, all right?
Right. We asked before if the Yidden were wrong in asking for this, so therefore why did Hashem agree? If they were wrong, so Hashem shouldn't have said they can have a king. That's the way a person's supposed to have the basic Yirah Shamayim, to do what's right, to not swallow up another person. All of lekabel al atzmai melech sheyifel etzlein yonim elu, even the basic things. If that's what the Yid is holding by, if that's my problem, that my problem is that I'm not keeping the basic Yirah Shamayim, fine. So let that be the reason for a king. So that's what David told Shmuel. You're right in being disappointed, but if that's all it's if that's what it's gonna take, so we'll have to do it that way. But of course, we don't want to leave it at that. Afterwards, from being trained and forced to act like a mensch, then he's going to come to a state where he'll have moich shalat alev. And then eventually he'll use the king only for the higher things. Not the king is going to be used to make sure that he behaves himself and doesn't kill anybody, but the king is going to be used to bring to him higher levels of appreciation and bittul before Hashem. So the Rebbe's shita is always everything in Torah, and the Rebbe always brings us down, is nitzchi. It's everlasting. So this idea about a king and how we need to have a king, soim tasam alech melech, even though we're not in Eretz Yisrael and we don't have the practical, physical mitzvah of making a king, but still in all, the concept of the mitzvah is always there. So the Rebbe is going to say where we find this concept all the time. Mikol inyan yeshlu midharav avodas Hashem afal pishav bezman hagolos ein lanu melech amru Chazal man malke rabbanim. Who is considered kings these days? Rabbanim. It says that we have to start off with a dvar malchus, poischem b'dvar malchus. What's it mean b'dvar malchus? Man malke rabbanim. When you open up a greeting, an event, whatever, you start off with words of the Chachamim, words of Torah. So we see that the Chachamim are called melachim. They're called kings. Kingship, by the way, we find that the Rosh Sanhedrin, as we mentioned today in Shul, is called a nasi. A nasi is just another word in the Torah a lot of times for a king. It says kasher nasi yechta. It's talking about halachas having to do with a king, because the same idea. Nasi is exalted. He's above. He's higher. So we find that the heads of the Sanhedrin was called like almost by the same title like the king is called. Kishem sheyeshna mitzvah shel min melech al derech zen nitztave ish Yisrael betzivui shel malke rabbanon asay l'charav. In the first Perek in Pirkei Avos, it says that we have an obligation to make for ourselves a rav. Ubezeh yesh ha'ira me'inyan anal yeshnam ha'soivrim shebenegel l'inyanim tachtoinim yicholim hem ba'atzmam lahavin o lahachlit. Ubemela einam tzrichim lishol oidoisem eitzel rav. Like we said, there is the lower level of the king that makes sure you just do what you know is right. And then there's the higher level of the king. So he says, I know what's right. Why do I need to have a rav? Why do I need to have someone to tell me what to do if I know what to do is what's right to do? Mishnah Namar Seil Charav Kol Yehudi Tzarech Sheyil Rav Ve'ilu Hu Savur Shakavana Bezehi Benegel Inyanim Nailim Avak Shevedu Beroidis Inyanim Pshutim Maimen Hu Ba'atzmai. He trusts himself. Ve'ein Zakuk Lashpal Shal Rav Be'icholtoi Lifol Zois Levadoi. That's what he thinks. So the Rebbe says in Yiddish, it's a lot more geschmacked the way the Rebbe says it. If this would be the case, so the Rebbe said, Why do you look the same now like 10 years ago? A person should always be growing. If a person looks the same 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and there's no improvement, then there's something showing that there's something missing over here. Hu yamtin ad sheya'ara alav ruach memorim ad sheyisoyre b'yira kedeboy v'yisakin kol ma shetzarech l'sakin b'koyach atzmai. I don't need a melech malke rabbanon. I don't need a rav. Val zehi hayirah deminui melech beruchnis b'zman hazeh hagam she'alecha etzel b'nei Yisrael. It says soim tosim alecha by a yid. What is the ideal rav? What's the ideal melech? For high things, not for low things. In Yonei Pulasi Shel Melech Shayachim B'ikim Benegel Madregis Nailos. But if the person sees that he hasn't improved in the last years, so then Harek Sheyesh Ne Matzav the Oisi Masu Chas V'Sholem Oichshash Le Matzav Kazeh Yesh Le'ishtamish Miyad B'Moira HaMelech B'Shvil Inyan Zeh, which means he has to consult a Rav and he has to say, how can I grow? How can I improve? A Rav doesn't mean a Rav necessarily. It can mean a Mashpia. It can mean someone that he looks up to, someone that can inspire him. Again, he doesn't find someone who can teach me. I know stuff. I don't see someone that's worthy enough and high enough that I should listen to him. All of Ladas, Shazom, Miatzas, Upiti, Ayetzer, that he doesn't find someone that's a Rav. Ki bevadai loy alman Yisrael. It's an expression that Yidden are not like a husband without a wife. Yidden always have, Hashem always supplies Yidden with the help they need. V'loy titochen metzias kazu shebein b'nei Yisrael loy nimtza af echad sheyesh loy avas Hashem v'yiras Hashem yoyser manu. You want to tell me that you mamish can't find someone that's better than you in some things, that has more love or more awe of Hashem? Umemela, if you could see that someone is better than you in certain things, yochel l'sham mishavurei rav. Elam shebeshvil zeh tzarech li is asay. It's a very interesting expression in Pirkei Avos. It says, asay l'chorav. Asay is usually something involving action. Having a Rav is not something that simply involves action. You should consult a Rav. You should study with a Rav. You should ask a Rav. Why does it use this expression asay? So asay, the Rebbe says, is from the word just like an action. When you do something, you got to put in effort. What does it mean? You got to put in effort. Even if I'm not interested in having a Rav, even if I don't see clearly how this person can be my Rav, I have to work on it. I have to do it. It's a job. Asay. Don't just ask. Do it. And also the Rebbe in the parentheses is going to say another deeper idea of asay, which means a person has to force themselves. Gam eloshim ma'asin al tzedakah kfiyas yeshes atzmai. The Chazal use a term that there are certain cases that Bezdin can force a person to give tzedakah. And the term that Chazal uses is ma'asin. So we see that the word having to do with asiyah can also mean forcing. So a person needs to force and bend his own ego. And he has to have a yigiyah. Allah l'syageya l'chapes ad sheyim tzarav. How come? Ki al atzmai asr loy lismoich. That's for sure. Because the Rebbe says in other times that a person, when it comes to himself, he's a neger b'davar. He has, his own way of like looking out for number one. To be able to have a true type of evaluation of something, you need to have an objective opinion. A person is neger b'davar, he doesn't have an objective opinion. Mukhrach sheyir loy rav. And what happens if I don't find? So the Rebbe says, it says in Pirkei Avos, if you put in effort, you'll find. Im yisyagev v'yachapes be'emes, yimtza Rav, he'll find himself a Rav. V'Rav ze yilamed v'yishanin imoyes aparshi she'amelech koyre b'hakel shma v'oyim shemoya. It's one of the major times when the Melech had an influence on the whole Klal Yisrael was Shnas Hakel. The Rebbe says this, the whole year is a Shnas Hakel. This whole year was a Shnas Hakel. He is still a Shnas Hakel. And Sukkot, in the Shnas Hakel, the year after the Shemitah, the king used to speak and read from Chumash Dvarim to the whole Klal Yisrael to inspire them and to bring them to a level of Yiras Hashem. And one of the things that he read from Chumash Dvarim was Parsha Shema and V'hayim Shemoya. What's the idea in those two parshas? Tchila Shema Shenyona Kabol Mal Shemayim. When we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, we're accepting Hashem as our king. That's the first thing that the king communicates to him. And that's the same thing nowadays when I take upon myself a Rav. I need to hear from him and I need to be inspired by him to be mekabel on myself El Mach Shemayim, like it says in the first part of Krishna. And then after that, he used to say, V'hoim Shemoya v'azai v'safta d'ganecha. V'varu ba'asogit shekim v'safta d'ganecha toli b'kim Shemoya tishmu. The Rav will explain to him in ways that he could understand, that by listening, by doing what he's supposed to do, so then physically it'll be good. V'safta d'ganecha, you'll actually be able to gather in your crops and your grains. This idea of this Rav will bring him to higher levels of appreciation of Hashem. And then the Rebbe says, even though this is true throughout all the generations, Pirkei Avos, it said this 2,000 years ago in Pirkei Avos. Still in all, the heels of the time of Mashiach. Erev bias Mashiach tzidkenu. The Rebbe always says that before Mashiach comes, we need to do things that are similar to and a preparation for Mashiach's times. This idea of taking upon ourselves a Rav is similar to what Mashiach will be. Mashiach will have in him both aspects. Rav, first of all, Mashiach will be a Rav. Even the Avos and even Moshe Rabbeinu that were learning Torah for thousands of years in Gan Eden, Mashiach will still teach them Torah. He will still have new things to teach them. So Mashiach's job will both be as a Rav, Melech, and will also be a king, Malka Mashiach, that it says Melech HaMashiach. So therefore, we will have both things, and we need to have the same thing in our own life, to have both the idea of a Rav that will teach us and a Rav that tells us what's the right thing, and this will bring us to Mashiach's coming immediately.
Amen. Well.